This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. And someone just joined us. Oh, that's Phil from the newspaper. So, hello, Philip. I'm going to call the meeting of the Economic Development Authority, the regular meeting on Thursday, May 28th, 2020. It is noon. First, I would ask an approval of the agenda, and I would have two additions. I would like to add under new business a item B, eligibility roster for the COVID microloan. We have another request. And then I'd like to add C, marketing and advertising and promotion. Pardon me. Would anyone be inclined to move the agenda with those two additions?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Yep, and just a reminder, please state your name. That was Ed Johnson making a motion to approve. Is there a second?
This is Bob. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. I'll do the roll call vote. EDA member Southworth,
Aye.
EDA member Johnson,
Aye.
EDA member Favor,
Aye.
EDA member DeVos.
Aye.
We have an agenda approved. We have the minutes from both April 23 and May 6th. You could make a motion to approve them individually or as one, or I guess we'd ask if there's any noted corrections.
I'd make a motion to approve them both. This is Bob.
We have a motion by Bob Southworth to approve the minutes for both April 23 and May 6th as presented. Is there a second to that motion?
Ed will second it.
We have a second by Johnson. I'll go through and see if there's any discussion. Councilman Johnson, any comments?
Nope.
Mr. Favor?
None.
Mr. DeVos?
Nope.
Mr. Southworth?
Nope.
Okay, we will call the roll call vote then, and we will start with Mr. Favor.
Aye.
Mr. DeVos?
Aye.
Mr. Southworth?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And we have approved minutes. We have no unfinished business, so I'll move to new business. Mary Brandt, who owns the real estate at 219 Nassau Street, has made application for the Central Business District Heritage Preservation Loans. These are eligible for the Central Business District businesses to make renovations and repairs to businesses. This has a maximum loan amount of $25,000 at 0%, and this is the loan product that has the forgivability when the balance is paid down to $5,000. The Brandts received two quotes, one quote from Schwickert and one quote from Ballman Roofing to do roof repairs, and they would like to engage Ballman Roofing. They were the low bidder. We had two bids that were received for the tuck pointing, one from Johnson Building Restoration and the other one from Consulting Masonry. They would like to engage Kasulki Masonry to provide the tuck pointing services. If you add both of those together, the total, will they be eligible for a $20,593 loan through the fund? That would be 90% of the project cost. They would finance the balance of $2,288 out of funds that are on deposit. We would amortize that note over 10 years. Sally had arranged a promissory note of $172 and not $171.61 that I put in there, so it'll be 39 cents more every month. And again, when that balance is paid down to $5,000, it'll be forgiven. Given that the Brandts have a financial relationship with two of the banks, I asked Corey, and I see Corey's joined us. Hello, Corey. To make contact with Mr. Brandt to have discussions regarding finances. And Corey, you didn't note anything that would cause any concern?
Oh, all good.
Okay, thank you. The building has a estimated market value as established by the assessor's office of $173,700. And in this instance, because there is no other mortgages recorded, it would be in a firm mortgage position, which we should celebrate. So at this point, I'm going to go around and well, I guess first of all, I'd offer Mr. Brandt an opportunity if he wanted to make any comments.
Yeah, we did re-roof the top roof after the tornado. The bottom roof was done in '96, so it's just time. When the one of the roof bidders was up there, he noticed tuck pointing. I went up with Ken Kishbalke, he reviewed it, and it's better to do something now rather than have it done and it's just time.
Thank you, Jim. Now I'll go through the members and ask if there's any questions for either Mr. Brandt or myself. One thing I'd ask, I think Mike or Bob, we're getting some feedback. I'm guessing it's off Mike's phone. Mike, can you mute your microphone and we can call on you to comment? We're getting some backfeeding.
Yeah, no, I don't believe I can.
Okay, well.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Mr. Prafke had something.
Mike, just to help you out, it would be through the normal way you mute your phone. You don't have to go through the app. If you're on your phone, it's just how you would normally mute your phone, if that helps.
Thank you. I'm going to go through and ask if there are any questions, and I'm going to start with EDA member DeVos.
I have no questions. It seems pretty standard. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Abels? None. Mr. Favor?
None.
Okay. Mr. Southworth?
None.
Mr. Johnson?
No questions.
I had prepared a resolution for your consideration that contemplated approval of the application and of the loan. I just want to make sure I didn't mention the $171. Nope, I did not mention $171.61, so we don't have to make any correction on that. Would anyone be inclined to move the resolution?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
I have a motion by Johnson. Is there a second?
Abels will second.
I have a second by Corey Abels. I'll go through one more time and ask if there's further discussion. We'll start with Councilman Johnson.
Nope.
Councilman DeVos.
Nope.
EDA member Abels.
No.
Mr. Favor.
No.
Mr. South.
No.
Okay. We will do a, oh, Mr. Prafke had
Russ, I don't recall if you mentioned this, but I would like to mention as a part of the process that we would go through, we will have, since Jim drafted the original promissory notes, we will have an outside attorney just take a quick look at that to ensure that you're protected, Jim and Mary are protected, we're all protected appropriately.
Thank you. I should have mentioned that. Todd and I had talked about the need to have that undertaken. So thank you. At this point, I'm going to call the roll call vote, and we'll start with Mr. Abels.
Yes.
Mr. Favor.
Aye.
Southworth.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. DeVos.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Jim. Your loan's been approved. This does not need to go through the Heritage Preservation because I can authorize roofing and tuck pointing as a repair and not as an alteration. So thank you, Mr. Brandt, for your and your wife's investment and your stewardship of our historic properties. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the loan, thanks for the approval. It's appreciated.
It'll be on the city council agenda at their next available meeting. So for them to take action. So thank you very much, everybody. To move under item B that we added, you've received another request to expand the eligibility of the COVID-19 microloan program. This is from Marcy Lorenz on behalf of Lorenz Businesses. She does bookkeeping, accounting, basically business to business. So, and she's similar to Ty. She said, I haven't been ordered to be closed, but many of my clients are not operating. And so she has had some business siphoned off. And she says she would benefit and she'd greatly appreciate an expansion. We've typically tried to do these based on what's called the zoning classification. In this case, as her request would say, it would be administrative and business offices. I'm going to read you the definition of that, and then I'm going to make a suggestion. Administrative business office in the zoning ordinance is defined as offices of private firms or organizations which are primarily used for the provision of executive, management, or administrative services. Typical uses include administrative offices and services, including real estate, insurance, property management, investment, personnel, travel, secretarial services, telephone answering, photocopy, and business office of public utilities, organizations, and associations, and other classifications when the service rendered is that customarily associated with administrative office services. Now, it would not be my intent to recommend that you add administrative and business offices because a number of them perhaps have not been impacted. If you would be inclined to add the bookkeeping, I would suggest that you would classify that as business-to-business bookkeeping services. Otherwise, I think the exposure would be, you can imagine all the number of financial institute or financial planning services and real estate offices that would be eligible. So that would be my recommendation if you were going to go forward with a suggestion to make that expansion. I'm going to ask for your comment, and I'm going to start with Mr. Favor.
None.
Mr. Southworth.
I really don't have any comments either right now.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Johnson.
Nope.
Mr. DeVos.
No questions.
Mr. Abels.
No comment. I guess the only comment I guess I would say is that I feel that with this money, if we are looking at the betterment of our businesses, we should look at this, be as liberal as we can with this, in hopes that we get paid back. But at the same time, I'm not. I guess I'm not sure. So.
Thank you. I'd ask, would anyone be inclined to make a motion? We do not have a resolution prepared, but I would suggest the motion would be to, again, my recommendation was business-to-business bookkeeping services, but the administrative office and business office was Marcy's request. Would anyone be willing to make a motion to provide for that expansion?
I will make a motion to expand. This is Ed.
To business bookkeeping, Ed? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there a second to his motion?
Second.
And we have a second by Abels. Now I go through one more time and ask for any further discussion, starting with Mr. Southworth.
None.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Nope.
Mr. DeVos.
Nope.
Mr. Abels.
No.
Mr. Favor. We might have lost Mike. Now I see a caller 2.
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. So none.
Okay. No further discussion necessary for you then. Now I will do the roll call vote. The motion is to add business-to-business bookkeeping services to the roster of eligible businesses to participate in the COVID-19 microloan program. And I will ask Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. DeVos.
Aye.
Mr. Abels.
Yes.
Mr. Favor.
Yes.
I heard yes. Mr. Southworth.
Yes.
Motion carried. I will notify Marcy and amend the eligibility in the application. The third item then under new business that I asked to be added is, and I'd sent out an email maybe a couple of weeks ago in anticipation. We are considering working with the chamber, well, it's actually leaning on the chamber quite a bit to develop some efforts to market and promote the St. Peter business community as businesses then are able to reopen. As we've talked to some of the businesses, we were looking at doing maybe some promotion with prize packages and such. That just kind of fell flat with the businesses that Ed and I talked to. They are, one, they're anxious about reopening safely for their employees and their customers. And 2, they're concerned, to be overwhelmed and just drive people to their store to get to the store. But they all encouraged us to perhaps undertake some type of a marketing efforts. Ed Lee from the chamber is pricing out ads in newspaper, on radio, perhaps even television, and then certainly a social media push. We don't have copy ready. We can't tell you we're going to advertise or plan to advertise in this paper on this day. But I am asking that you the EDA would establish $10,000 that we could use to undertake a marketing effort as businesses are able to reopen after the COVID situation. To finance that 10, I would suggest if it were to be promoted by you to the council, that those funds be obtained from that interest income of the revolving loan funds. In 2019, we had just under $36,000 in interest income. As you'll recall, we committed some of that to the handicapped accessible entryway program, and we had 3 funded for a total of $12,225. Let me get rid of that. Sorry about that. So that would leave a balance of $23,711, and I would recommend, if you would be willing to go forward with marketing and promotions, that we obtain $10,000 from that account. Again, we don't have a defined, but I just like your approval, and then give us the ability to approach the council with a little bit more of a detailed plan. I'd add, Mr. Frafke, you have anything to add?
Our goal would continue to be to work with the chamber, and the chamber could assist by providing for a committee or not. I think there's some challenges now in trying to get a group of people together to try and define this. Everybody has a little bit of their own perspective. I think also in our discussions with Ed, it's been very clear that we don't see this just as a pure promotion piece. It might be more in the realm of a promotion of the safety of small businesses within St. Peter who care about their friends and neighbors and their customers and can provide customized service in a safe environment. That's maybe a little bit more of the spin to give you a feel for that. And it wouldn't be specifically for targeted businesses. It would be for all the businesses downtown, whether it's retail, hospitality, whatever it is, a generalized promotion, not a sector by sector promotion opportunity.
I'll start with questions, comments, and I'll start with Mr. Johnson.
I am not real sure if I would agree with something like this, just for the simple fact that everybody doesn't know that the businesses are slowly starting to open. And instead of doing a big push to get a bunch of people in, it might be just a better slow and go, and not do a promotion right now till I get a few more details on what you plan. It's just my opinion.
Those sentiments certainly have been shared by some of the retail establishments down there. It's kind of been a mixed bag. Some are saying we need to promote, and others are saying, no, hit the brakes, we want to ease into this. So yeah, your comments, Mr. Johnson, are very similar to some of those others that I've heard downtown. Do you have anything else to add, Ed?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, Mr. DeVos?
I basically, I feel the same way. Actually, I want the businesses to, I want them to get back, but we're supposed to be easing back into things. And my concern with going with the promotion or going where right now might cause people to do that surge at surging into businesses that we're trying to avoid. I mean, we want everyone to still be responsible, and I that's my concern too, is this a potential surge that this may cause. So
thank you, Mr. DeVos. Anything further?
No, that's it. So
okay, Mr. Abels.
I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings on it. I would like to see us do something. I would like to know a little bit more about what the plans are to do with the money. I know Watertown, Minnesota, they sent chamber checks out to every household in the town of Watertown to use with their local businesses during the shelter in place. So I think that there is something that we can be done. I just don't know the best way, and I'd kind of like to know what it's going to be used for. And I would even be open to spending more than the 10,000 if we feel there's going to be positive results long term for our business owners and our citizens of St. Peter.
Certainly, thank you. One of the challenges is, as the city, we've got to be cognizant and of service to both chamber and non-chamber members. So we talked about utilizing chamber bucks, but you can only redeem them at a chamber member. So there are a number of businesses, for whatever reason, have chosen not to join our local chamber. So we also want to be fair. And when we did the Discover 169, it was opened up to everybody, not just the chamber members. So thank you for your comments. Mr. Favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Corey, you had one other issue.
And with that, the one thing that they can do is just temporarily let every business accept them. I mean, that's up to the chamber to make that decision on who accepts those checks. So we could allow every business in St. Peter for a time period to accept them if we wanted to go that route. Just not that we have to, just an idea. I had asked Todd how many residential electric and or water bills go out every month. He says around 3,400 water bills go out every month. You know, if we gave $50 to each, that's a lot of money. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. And then there's one other issue. There are a number of chamber members, well, not a number, not a large number, but there are some that are not within the city of St. Peter city limits. And so we are prohibited from making loans to those businesses. I don't know, perhaps there wouldn't be difficulty in engaging them in a promotional effort. I'd have to kind of find out what the restrictions may or may not be for that. Anything further,
Actually,
Corey? Okay, Mr. Favor?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's actually probably more than you think of. There are quite a number of businesses in the chamber that are outside of St. Peter. But yeah, no, just like the first two comments, you know, with the easing into it. So I guess I would be more supportive of that opinion.
Mr. Southworth?
Yeah, my comments are the same as the first two. Is, you know, at what point is there a process to it over a certain time period? Or I'm not a big fan of doing it all in 1 month, because
Right.
different businesses are going to have different services at different times that are available. So
Yeah, I think Ed, as he looked at this, was perhaps considering they'd have a recurring ad on the bottom banner, I call it, of the life section of the free press. When we did Discover 169, we had that space reserved. I think it was for every Friday for the entire summer. But I think if this was going to be put forward, it would be for an extended period of time. It would not just be to spend everything in June and say we're done. Because people are going to ease into this. You know, my shopping habits are certainly going to change. My dining habits are going to change. And if you've seen newspaper articles, people are already calling out businesses that aren't operating in what they feel is safe. That'll be kind of the new way of judged by people stopping there. Yeah, so I don't disagree.
I don't know. I don't know how much, you never can rate how advertising works. I think people are itching to get out. So is advertising going to get them out? I don't know.
Yep. I think Mr. Brackey had something he'd like to add.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask for a little bit more direction, maybe your thought on the part of the members. So what I think I hear you saying is that you are supportive of some level of promotion. You want to know a little bit more about what the plan might be. And by plan, you might mean where and over what period of time utilization might be put in place. And so if you're interested in that, you have a couple of, if that sounds about right, I mean, there's a couple of different paths. Certainly, we could come back to you in the future after more of that has been worked out and thought out and discussed. Or you could say, here's a few bucks, make that happen for right now. Let us know what you're doing and come back to us and give us a report. I mean, I think either of those are acceptable. We are trying to be thinking ahead a little bit. And as I said at the beginning, the overall thought has been, certainly we don't want to see a run, but we do want to continue to emphasize that. And so let me be very blunt. I think we want to promote that local business owners care more about their friends and neighbors and are going to take the appropriate precautions so you can feel safer in St. Peter by coming to do some of your trading. That's different than maybe what you see in other bigger box stores and other places outside of St. Peter. And so that's, again, the negative way to think about it, but we try and promote that in a positive way. And I think that's the overall theme, but certainly we can work out more details and come back to you if you'd like.
Mr. Abels, I see your hand up.
Yes, and Todd, I appreciate that, and I agree with what you're saying. One thing that I think a route we should really look at is, I think we all know that there's many people who live and play in St. Peter, but don't work in St. Peter. And with the face of business changing, so many people are not driving to Shakopee or Mankato or wherever. This is our opportunity, and it's really the chamber's opportunity to do something to get people to shop local, to not do so much Amazon, to not have to run to Mankato for everything, to really take part in our mom and pop shops and our local places. And so I think we need to look at it from yes, we need to try to bring people in from Cleveland and Mankato, et cetera, but how can we get our locals to shop local better or even more?
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment? Just wave your hand and instead of going through the whole list. Well, I can't hear you, Mike. Do you have it? I can't see you, Mike. Do you have a comment?
No.
Okay. Anyone else wave your hand? Since we're not taking any action, would you be adverse to us coming back a little bit later with perhaps a little bit more defined and something that would be reserved and prudent?
Correct. You can come back once you get a few things ironed out and what's going to take place. I'd be more than happy to agree with the donation as long as we knew what was happening.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll probably invite Ed to join us then too. So thank you all. Any other comments or questions? Just wave your hand, or again, I'll call on you, Mike. Anything? Nope. Okay.
Just one comment. And I know it might be late in the game on, internships, but maybe the money some of it could be spent on a college student going into marketing, doing an internship and figuring out how to advertise on free platforms.
A good idea.
Free social media platforms instead of just putting it in the newspaper or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I will add that to my discussions with Ed. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to reports. Thank you all. I've asked Dr. Jeff Olson, interim superintendent of the St. Peter School System, to join us to discuss about the enrollment projections that they had commissioned. I'd sent that out in a separate email a couple weeks, maybe a month ago already. So I hope everybody's had an opportunity to scan through it. And Dr. Olson, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here. I'm trying to figure out how to show my screen. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. So I was really pretty excited about the fact that I'd mastered all of these forms of technology in terms of Google Meetings and Zooms and webcams, and now I can't get my camera on, but that's okay because you probably don't need to see me anyway. So,
Jeff, if I can, I did make you a presenter, so right now I can see your screen. If your screen says "Have a great meeting,"
my screen doesn't say that, but as long as you can hear me, I'll just take off and give you a little bit of background. So I want to give you a little bit of the rationale behind the demographic study, hit some of the high points in terms of the history of enrollment over the last 10 years in the St. Peter School District, talk about enrollment projections, and then talk about factors that the study identified as important or significant in terms of impacting enrollment. Just to give you a little bit of a primer, in school district finance, the three most important factors are enrollment, enrollment, and enrollment. So it really is about the number of kids in the seats in the schools. That accounts for roughly 3/4 of the funding that a school district gets, and it's primarily then through the state of Minnesota. In terms of a bit of the history, we have had demographic studies completed in the St. Peter School District in 2005 and in 2012. And so as I came on board in 2019, about a year ago at this time, in working with the school board, it seemed appropriate to undertake another demographic study to see where projections would point us in the next 10 years, how that would impact our planning, our budgeting, and our stabilization of our financial picture. So we contracted with Reinhardt Consulting. That person is Hazel Reinhardt. Hazel Reinhardt is kind of the gold standard of school demographic studies in Minnesota. She's a former state demographer, so she has tremendous credibility and experience, and I think does a particularly fantastic job. She completed that study in early January and shared out results, and we were planning to have a full out sharing of those demographic study findings in the March, April time period. And of course, the pandemic hit, schools were closed down, and we've been in a distance learning format through today, which is officially the last day of school of the 2019-20 school year. So let me give you a little bit of the history. And by the way, anytime anybody has a comment or a question, just stop me and we'll try to respond to that. So over the last 10 years, the school-age population in St. Peter has increased by 25%. Most of that has been through district enrollment. In other words, students that live in the school district and then attend school in the school district. That increase has been about 21.5%. And then another 4% has come from students outside of the school district. You may know that in Minnesota, it's an open choice state. So a student can opt to enroll in any public school district or public charter school in Minnesota. And so it's good in terms of providing that impetus for competition. We get about 85% of what you might call the market share of the students that live in St. Peter, and that's a little bit above the state average. So 15% of the students that are eligible to attend public school in the St. Peter School District attend elsewhere. They might attend John Ireland, they might attend St. Peter Evangelical Lutheran School, they might be homeschooled, they might open enroll to any number of school districts around us. So that's the piece that we saw coming 10 years ago. We did our demographic study that we were going to have pretty significant enrollment growth, and we had to do some things to address that, not the least of which was expanding our facilities, and that's the building of the new high school. So now we get to the enrollment projections over the next 10 years. And really the projection from Hazel Reinhardt is relatively flat enrollment. That's not obviously ideal. Districts would like to see a relatively mitered out, if you will, or sort of slow growth in order to handle that growth over a 10-year period. Usually you might be looking at something like 1 to 2% a year. But really the projection is flat enrollment. Now that obviously isn't the worst case scenario, because really if you go anywhere south and west of Mankato, those school districts are experiencing enrollment decline. And that really causes problems in terms of how do you continue to offer the kinds of programs and services that you want to offer when your enrollment's dropping and thus your funding is dropping as well. So the projection is somewhere around 0% to 2.2% enrollment increase in a 10-year period. Now, one of the things that is somewhat hard for a demographer to project is what's called in-migration. So in St. Peter, and I've been now in and around the St. Peter School District for 45 years, and one of the things that you see in St. Peter is the in-migration occurs in the upper grades, so basically grades 7 through grade 12. And part of that, of course, is that we capture almost all of the John Ireland students. They come into our public school setting. Many more recently of the St. Peter Evangelical Lutheran School students come into the public school setting. And we're starting to see over the last 3 years since the building of the new high school, a pretty significant increase in our open enrollment beginning at the 9th grade. So those are factors that can impact those enrollment projections. So then you get into what are the factors that impact the decision of people to send their students to the St. Peter Public Schools, whether they live here, decide to live here, or want to open enroll here. The first and most important thing is that you have to have a quality school system that has a wide range of programs and offerings. And really what people look at is, do you have small class sizes at the elementary level? Do you have a comprehensive middle school and a comprehensive high school that looks at all kinds of options for educating students so they're what we would call choice ready when they graduate from high school. You have to have on the next factor is a good place to live and work, a good city. And I think we've got that. We see people who want to live in St. Peter because it is a good place to live and work. You clearly have to have affordable and available daycare. And Todd and maybe Russ and some others will remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, we were really pushing hard for those center-based daycare operations and other daycare operations to be in place. And I think that work has paid off, and I see that in our community right now. And then the final factor is you've got to have appropriate and available housing. And, you know, when we started in kind of that work in looking at housing really around 2000, it was affordable and available housing. And what the study that we have in our hands today tells us, it's appropriate and available housing. So it's interesting. Most of the student population, the bigger turnaround in the student population is in housing that's been built since 2000. And we get the bigger bang for our bucks if you read that in terms of housing that is in that $200,000 plus range. And actually what we hear anecdotally from people who are shopping around to decide if they're going to live in St. Peter, quite honestly, including some of our own staff members, is there just isn't that housing availability in that $250,000, $300,000, $350,000 range. And that's really what it appears there's been a shift to. Hazel Reinhardt said that's not uncommon in other communities that she's done these kinds of studies in. An example would be Moorhead, and I happen to have done quite a bit of work in Moorhead in the 5 years that I was retired and working with their school system in terms of their high school programming and then ultimately a facility study. And I saw Hazel Reinhardt's work, and it was spot on. So the projections right now are that there aren't significant numbers of houses in that range that I just mentioned that are being constructed or that are planned to be constructed. And in her findings and in her estimation and her report, one of the factors is that's something that can change these projections to the upward swing, that there is that appropriate and available housing. The other factor that we don't know about is the impact of COVID-19 on the whole picture. You know, we have some, at this point, a small number of families who have contacted us and told us, well, here's the deal, Jeff. We're not coming back to school in the fall, no matter what the type of program you have to offer, unless it's online learning. They're just nervous about sending their kids back to school. So, you know, as you guys know, that people are sort of all over the board on how they view the dangers of the pandemic, but there are certainly some that are there. If we're back to school in this fall and it's a distance learning format, I'm really concerned about what that does in terms of our kindergarten enrollment. Because if you think about it, why would you send your kindergartner to school, but they're never in school? You've still got them at home. They haven't had any connection with a teacher or a school system, and they don't really have, you know, the comfort with the kind of technology that we're using right now. So that's kind of the up to down staircase. I'm certainly open to any comments or questions that anybody might have.
I'll try to usher us through some questions here. First of all, I'll start with Mike. Do you have any questions for Dr. Olson?
No, very interesting presentation, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Southworth?
No, not, but that last comment you made that's a big comment, that if you start with online learning, your kindergarten enrollment might be zero.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're really trying to figure that one out. You know, that my gut level is we are not going to be back to school in the fall in a normal traditional setting. I think we're likely to be back in some form of hybrid setting, which then I think would minimize that kindergarten piece. But if it's distance learning or online learning, That's a whole nother ballgame.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Bob. Anything else, Bob?
No, but yeah, I would
Okay.
agree with his comment on the housing. You know, if a house comes up in the 250 to 350 range, that thing is usually gone within a week. So
Thank you, Bob.
I would agree with that comment.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to questions or
I have no questions or
Thank you.
comments.
Mr. DeVos?
No questions. Like Bob said, the COVID thing, the COVID comment really jumped out. Bob and Corey both have kids in school too, so I know they're probably seeing the same struggles we are. You know, the question is, you know, the distance learning versus doing something in school, because, you know, my kids aren't getting as much out of the distance learning as they will be in school, but at the same time, how do you balance that? So I don't envy the school district having to figure that one out. So.
Thank you, Mr. DeVos. Mr. Abels?
I agree with what Dr. Olson has said and with the study. And I guess first off, I want to say thank you, Dr. Olson. You've done a magnificent job this last year. And I think everyone appreciates you coming back and helping out for this and taking that leadership role again.
Thank you.
So, but I don't have anything else to add to it.
I wasn't anticipated being in distance learning for 10 weeks, I'll tell you that.
As to the housing issues, I will note that the St. Peter Development Corporation is having some very, very preliminary discussions as to whether they would want to encourage or get into the business of building those houses in those price ranges that were discussed. So they've talked to us about a couple of different options. Mr. Prafke has a comment.
If I can, members, as council members may recall, even though it was canceled, we had a goal setting session scheduled at the end of March, and part of that goal setting session was what I would call a broader discussion about housing overall within our community and what's the city's role, what isn't its role, those type of things. So I still anticipate that discussion is going to go on. I hope it will be able to go on at a goal setting session on the 29th. You know, we've talked very often about how does that work, and are we building houses? Aren't we? Are we adding subdivisions? Aren't we? Are we recruiting? Are we providing incentives? What do we do? And so you've all been a party to at least major portions of that, or aware of major portions of that, including the RFP for the 15 acres that we have in the northern area of Traverse Green. And so I'm really grateful that the district undertook a study of this type and can help provide a little bit more focus relative to where value might be obtained, at least from a school district's perspective and development of housing. But I think the housing discussion is going to continue to be ongoing. It's been very clear to me that at least as of a few months ago, the council did not have an appetite to be involved in the development of housing, of building homes. We've been hoping the Development Corporation will move forward, but it'll be interesting to see how that discussion evolves. Everything's topsy-turvy with COVID. But as soon as we hope that settles down, my hope is to have some type of go-forward plan like we did, as Jeff articulated, in the early 2000s that helped make some housing move forward within our community. And so I think it's time for a review of that plan. Their information is fantastic, but frankly, from an Economic Development Authority perspective, you have often been the financial horsepower that has propelled whatever plan is put in place. So wanted you to be aware that that probably is still likely the case if something moves forward and we can get a plan together about where do we want to go and what areas do we want to hit on.
Thank you, Mr. Prafke. I think I did get to everybody. Dr. Olson, thank you very much. I know your plate is as full as anyone's. And I don't know if any of that slows down after the last day of school, but your leadership is greatly appreciated, and I'll echo Corey's statements that it's comforting to have such experience available in that seat. So thank you.
Thank you, and stay safe, enjoy, have a good day.
You too. Mr. Prafke is on the agenda next. He is going to discuss a potential financing mechanism to build a fire station that may include the EDA, similar to what's done at the hospital and before that at the EDA center, at the community center. So, Mr. Prafke.
So, Mayor, members, I asked to be on the agenda to just give you a heads up. I don't think this is imminent. This isn't within the next month or two or anything like that, but I wanted to give you a heads up. As Russ indicated, the EDA participated as part of the financing mechanism of the community center, which is now, almost 20 years old. And so actually, as a factoid for you, an important piece of data, the last debt service payment will be made in August on the community center. And of course, the EDA was used as a conduit financing mechanism for the city to make some of that stuff go. Not that it's for sure, but it is certainly one of the options that's on the table and being discussed as a potential financing mechanism should, if, when a fire hall moves forward. I also want you to know that we are pursuing USDA dollars, which would be fantastic. And while that might eliminate any long-term commitment that might be necessary, or we might ask for from the EDA or through the city council, think about that as holding a mortgage, and we would still need construction money to make something go. So there still might be a role for the EDA to play. My goal wasn't to convince you of anything or sell you on anything today, but just to let you know that that's one of the options that's out there that we may come back to you and talk about within the next few months. It's a great option. It provides for great affordability and makes projects like the community center move forward. And so it is one of those options that is under consideration yet. To talk a little bit more about the fire hall and the process there just quickly, we don't know exactly what is going to happen with the legislature yet this year. I'm not talking about this session, which of course is over, but I'm talking about this year. And as you know, the city council had indicated very clearly that they had hoped to pursue a sales tax approval, local approval, for financing or for providing resources and revenue stream for a majority of the fire hall. Now, that sales tax bill was not approved, nor was any of the 14 or so that were requested at the state. It was pushed off due to COVID issues and other priorities of the state legislature. But I have been assured by the Senate tax chair that it is viewed as regular business, regular in quotations, and that there has been a lot of discussion about will there be, should there be, is there opportunity to have a special session that provides for doing all or some regular business of the state legislature, whether it's a bonding bill or you pick it. There are a lot of things that they would normally get to that they didn't get to. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. We might not know for a while, but that might influence what happens here as well. And certainly the council has had ongoing discussion about that and will have ongoing discussion about where we're at relative to those issues. But again, I wanted to be on the agenda to kind of give you a heads up that there might be an impact that the EDA can have, an assist that the EDA can have in propelling a project like that forward. So again, wanted you to be aware. Last item that I'll mention related to the community center, not just that factoid about August is the last debt service payment, but it's important to know that how that worked was that the city, the EDA had a lease with the city. So the city was paying the debt service. So it wasn't dollars that were reserved for loans or anything like that that were used as a part of that. It was really truly a conduit, a mechanism by which the financing could take place. So I'll be quiet, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer as best as I can right now.
Let's start
Okay,
with,
Todd,
oh, go ahead.
so I wasn't asked to speak, sorry.
That's all right, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I accidentally disconnected the call here for just a few minutes, so I might have missed this if you said it, but really realistically, what's the most likely timeline on the fire station? Maybe a best case scenario, if you can, if you know.
Yeah. So let me give you what I think is a best case scenario. I think, and it depends on what your perspective is. If you want to see a fire hall built, then the best case scenario is probably quicker rather than later. So from a practical standpoint, how it relates to election law and all those things have to work together. Sometime in July and August, the council has to make a decision to be able to put that on a ballot for the local populace to vote on whether sales tax would be used or not, whether sales tax would be put in place. If the legislature doesn't give the council that authority, which is really what the state bill is about, because they changed the rules. And Mike, if you want to talk more, there's a 5-hour story on this. But to keep it short, the state has to provide approval for this to go on a ballot, and then the council has to make a decision whether they want to see it on a ballot or not. That has to happen sometime in July or in August for it legally under the current election rules to be on a ballot in November. So that could be pushed out. frankly, the council could make a decision and say, well, we're going to move forward anyway. And we could hope that there is an opportunity for retroactive sales tax. Now, that has been done in the past when there have been emergencies that have occurred. I don't know that we're hanging our hat on that without some additional assurances that things go on, but those are certainly areas that the council has started to discuss and will continue to discuss. But I would say best timeline is we are viewed as regular business. Approval is given in a special session July and August. It gets on the ballot in November. People vote. If they vote yes, then we start construction sometime in the spring of 2021. Beyond that, it could push a couple of years waiting for that next legislative session cycle.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
Mr. Chair and members, that's all I really have. If you have other questions and you want to talk some more, please feel free to give me a ring. And certainly, this isn't something that we're asking you to do today. I don't even know that we will ask you to do something. There just are a number of avenues, and I want to make sure that we're trying to keep people, our line of communication going with all those who could possibly be asked to be involved.
Thank you. Mr. Southworth, any questions?
No, I don't have any.
Mr. Abels?
No.
Mr. DeVos?
Well, I see Sally's on. Maybe she can answer this one. I think the previous projections were about 390,000 a year in debt service. With the drop in interest rates, are there any new projections on the debt service at this point?
The current one we're looking at is about 200 or 360,000
Okay.
with the change in interest, and that's going down to right now to 2.375 interest rate.
Thank you. That's all I had. Just curious on
Well,
that. So.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and Brad and Sally, let me add to that. We do continue to pursue USDA funding, and we have a pre-approval. And so the interest rate that Sally's talking about is where we believe USDA is at. It's also important to note that if we do get approval, which they have money ready to go, so it's us kind of checking off those boxes and doing that appropriately. And I got Sally's doing it, so I know it's being done well. If we're approved, that guarantee of interest rate, that it will not go up, stays in place for about 5 years. So that's how this kind of fits together, I think.
Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Okay, I think we went through everyone. Thank you, Mr. Sprafke. We're getting close to an hour, so I'm just going to run through what I had for the reports. We are working with the businesses to expand sidewalk and parking lot dining. We're communicating with them. I've already got a couple applications in. We are still requiring that they obtain a sidewalk use permit, but we are waiving any fees for those. If it is an establishment that serves alcoholic beverages, they need to give us a site plan that shows where they would expand the seating. And then that, once we put that in our file and we approve it, that establishes their retail premises. And that extends their liquor license out onto the sidewalk area or into the parking lot. If it's a liquor serving establishment, then that area has to be delineated or defined or confined. So we still need to maintain the appropriate liquor control, which is our intent. And the other issue that comes into play is the need to maintain handicapped accessibility. So we need to keep 4 feet area wide on the sidewalk clear for circulation for those with mobility impairments. As you heard Mr. Johnson talk, that Redmond is kind of just going to sit still for a little bit and see how this works out. But we're working with El Agave. They want to put a canopy in their parking lot. We're working with them. I met with the Legion. Nassau Street sidewalk is really not wide enough to practically accommodate something, but the sidewalk on 3rd Street is 12 feet wide. So they could set aside 8 feet for service and maintain 4 feet clearance. And they'd have probably room for 8, 9 tables and chairs out there. So it is quite an expanse. But we are working with them. But that it's important that we maintain the liquor control. That's very important, and it's very important to the service establishment too. Is there any questions for me on that matter? And I'll start with Mr. Abels. You can just shake your head, no? Mr. DeVos? Mr. Southworth? And it looks like Mike left us. And now we do not have a quorum, so I believe we need to adjourn. Is that correct, Mr. Brefke? I'm sorry, I didn't notice when Mike left. Well, we don't have any further business to sell. I did sell the spec house. We'll get you the details. I'm waiting for some of the final bills. So that's all I had, gentlemen. And I don't even think we need a motion to adjourn because we don't have enough people to vote to adjourn. So we're adjourned by the lack of a quorum. So we usually don't go this late, but thank you for those that were able to stick it out. Have a wonderful afternoon. You know how to get a hold of me. Brad, are you at your home? I have an envelope for you.
Yes, I am home.
Can I drop that off here in a little bit?
Yeah, yep, I'll be home all afternoon, so.
Okay, thank you. Everybody else, have a good afternoon.